Here are 5 tips that you can use to get better recorded guitar tones.
Hey, editor Tyler here. Just FYI, while I'm editing this video, I shot this like a month or two ago, and I meant to go back in here and record like sound examples of each of these things. I've been busy, a lot of projects, other videos. I've got a 1-year-old. I never really got around to doing that, and quite frankly, I don't really feel like doing that at this point. So this is just going to be kind of a talking head video, and there's several other things with this video that I will pop in and let you know about occasionally, so there you go.
So I want this to be a quicker video that's not quite as rambly, so we'll get something real quickly out of the way up front.
I'm already back. Yeah, I checked, this video is like 11 minutes, and I haven't even put this in or done any of the processing, so sorry about that.
Guitar tone is completely subjective, and many of you will hate every single tip in this video. And that's totally fine. These are just a few things that I believe has improved my recorded guitar tone over the years. Your results will also be highly genre dependent, so if you've listened to the trio's music and you've heard my guitar tones and you're like, then obviously you may not find as much use in these. But hopefully everyone can take something away from this video. Also, just to be clear, for some of these tips, I'm going to be using certain pieces of gear. First off, this is not a sponsored video. All the gear that I'm about to show you, I paid for myself. And second, these are tips. And while they may require certain types of gear, you almost certainly do not need the exact same thing that I am using. So do not feel like you have to run out to the store right now and buy the exact thing that I am showing off, especially if you already own something that's comparable to the piece of gear that I'm showing. So with that out of the way, let's go to tip number 1. Always record a DI track. One thing that I found works really well is when you record a raw DI signal along with your mic'd up amp and cab or simulator or whatever you're using to record your guitar.
Okay, like, last thing here. I noticed that for whatever reason, I don't know what the camera exposure is doing. There's a lot of clips that it starts dark and then like within a second or two gets to normal exposure. I don't know what that's about. Don't know what I did. Sorry if it's distracting, but wanted to give you a heads up.
It's a little daunting at first, and it can be a little more time-consuming, but once you know what you're doing, it's actually pretty straightforward, and you'll thank yourself that you did it most of the time. I use the Z-Tone DI by IK Multimedia. I really like this because it's both a DI box that allows you to split the signal to send a raw DI to your DAW along with whatever the rest of your signal path is, but it also allows you to reamp, which is when you take that raw DI signal and run it out of your DAW into another amp or something else. So basically you capture your performance and you're able to send it out later to an amp or something else and tweak to your heart's desire without having to replay the whole thing. And that is the reason that I suggest you have a raw DI track, because they do sound terrible by themselves. But if you dialed in your amp or your modeler to a tone that you don't really care for, and that's the only thing you recorded, then you're out of luck if you want to change anything. The tone is what it is. You either have to live with it and do a lot of post-production to try and get it to fit what you want, or you have to re-record the part all over again. Just last week, this came in handy because Matt and I were actually working on a recording that he was doing for someone else, and we did not really dig the guitar tone, but we had the DI signal, so we were able to throw some more amp modelers on it and get a cleaner sound than what they had recorded in. We didn't have to call the guitar player back in. He didn't have to re-record anything. We didn't have to set a whole setup back up. We literally took the DI signal, put a modeler on it, tuned something else in, and we were good to go. Now, in many cases, the original signal you set up through the amp or modeler or whatever may nail it, and you never use that DI signal, but it's just one of those things that's better to have and not need than need and not have. Tip number 2, use a ribbon mic. Now, this one lands solidly. I can't say solidly. Now, this one lands firmly in the personal preference category, but I will tell you my recording life changed when I first got a ribbon mic. Now, the classic go-to solution for recording guitar is the Shure SM57. And I don't want to bash on this mic. It has provided plenty of great guitar tones, both live and in the studio, for decades and decades since its release. However, I found that every time that I recorded a guitar with an SM57, it was almost always very harsh. It never sounded like the amp did in the room to me. Then one day I was watching a Rick Beato video in which he was showing how to mic up a guitar cab using an SM57 and a Royer 121 ribbon mic. And after recording it, he did an A-B where he played the Royer and then he played the 57 and then he played them together. And I was floored because the vast majority of the tone that I really liked was coming from the Royer 121 ribbon mic. For most of the things that he showed, I didn't even think the 57 needed to be in the equation besides some darker amps that needed a little bit brighter tone. Now, I gave up on purchasing a Royer 121 when I found out that they were an eye-watering $1,500. But not too long after that, Royer released the R10 ribbon microphone, which is sort of in the same vein as a 121, and it sounds fantastic. It's what I've used ever since. To me, the ribbon mic just more accurately captures what the guitar amp sounds like and doesn't have any of the ice-picky highs or the fizziness that I often have with other microphones. Now, I'm fully aware of all the tips I'm about to go over. This one is probably the most expensive, but I cannot tell you how many problems this has solved for me, not even having to mix or anything, just putting this in front of the amp and going, well, there it is. I don't have to do much. And I think purchasing a ribbon mic may be worth it rather than trying to purchase multiple amps or pedals or even studio gear to try and fix that fizziness and high-end issue that a lot of guitar amps have when they're recording. Now, the R10, as of this recording, is $599, and it is the only ribbon microphone I own. However, I have heard very good things about SE Electronics' Voodoo Ribbon series, which starts at about $399. And I'm even seeing ribbon mics by MXL and Golden Age going for about $300 with pretty solid reviews on Sweetwater. So snagging a ribbon mic may make sense if you haven't liked anything that you've gotten out of your SM57 or other dynamic mics. Tip number 3, this is an easy one. Use less gain. Now, metal players and high gain players may throw the suggestion out the window, but what I've found is when recording my guitar, however much gain or distortion I think I need, I probably need about 20% less than that. Now, this was something that took me a while to actually dial in. I would sit there and mess around and get a nice, sweet, sustaining guitar lead sound, and then I would record it, and when I played it back, I was amazed at how much more distorted it sounded to me in the recording versus what I was hearing there in the room. And this issue was very obvious in lighter tracks that did not have as much heavy distortion or instrumentation, and then all of a sudden a solo would fly in from left field that had way too much distortion on it for the rest of the feel of the song. And a lot of these tones to me ended up losing articulation and just kind of felt mushy. I think that AC/DC is a really good example of this. If you ask most guitar players who aren't super into AC/DC to dial in an AC/DC sound, they will probably crank the gain on their amp and just go to town. But if you really listen to AC/DC, especially those earlier albums, those guitars are way cleaner than you would think they are. A clean sound to me can sound more complex and punchy, as opposed to an overly distorted sound can sound very compressed and kind of mushy, and at the end of the day, sometimes that doesn't quite have the effect that you would like it to. Now, not only does this tip apply to your guitar amp or overdrive or modeler, but this can also apply to the guitar you're using. There's been a number of times that I've played a big solo with a humbucker-equipped guitar, and it's just not there, too distorted, too compressed, and I switched to a single coil guitar, and even though it is a big solo, the single coil guitar just sounds better because it cuts a little bit more and it's less compressed. Now, obviously, if you're playing metal or have a fuzz pedal or going for like a Dinosaur Jr., just absolute wall of sound, you can toss this tip out the window. It really is not applicable. But for most other genres that have distorted guitar, but it's not crazy distorted, if you don't like the tone you're getting, try backing the gain off a little bit and see if that improves things. Tip number 4, try a hybrid workflow. As is often stated by a lot of YouTubers and guitar critics, we are in a golden age of gear. And as someone who has sworn off most digital amp replacements during the vast majority of my career, I gotta say, I do think we are in a place right now that most of the alternatives are actually pretty decent, especially in a studio setting. Now, I will admit that I rarely go digital for anything other than rehearsals or demos, but I have found a hybrid workflow to be very beneficial. Combining analog and digital has never been easier, and it can really cut out some of the more expensive or time-consuming elements of recording. For instance, one of the things I now love doing is taking one of my tube amps, plugging it into the 2 Notes Torpedo Captor 8, taking that raw signal and sending it to my DAW, and then using 2 Notes Genome program to put a cab IR or dynamic IR over that signal to simulate a cab being mic'd. See, this allows me to utilize my guitars and pedal board and amp heads without having to take the time to mic the cabinet or tune in different settings, and without the expense of having to treat my room and buy preamps and microphones and all that kind of stuff. Professional IRs are already modeling an expensive cab, a very nice microphone, and a recording console that probably costs more than my house. Plus, when doing it that way, I've recorded silently, so I don't have to worry about if my HVAC system kicked on or my kids started crying. Now, I still do often record by miking the cab, but this has just produced a lot of really good results, and it is much quicker to do. Another example is with reamping, like I mentioned. If you have a certain effect that you want, but you don't own that pedal, rather than going out and buying the pedal and waiting for it to come, you can just get an AmpSim software, throw the flanger or whatever it is on it, send that signal out to your amp, and then re-record it that way. This may save you a couple $100 just by quickly using a guitar plugin to get what you're needing rather than invest in the gear that you're only going to use once or twice for a certain part on a track. So all in all, if you're a guitar player that mainly uses analog gear, I encourage you to try out some digital gear and see if it makes your life a little easier. At the end of the day, the digital version may not quite sound as good as the $10,000 all analog audio path that a top tier studio may have, but it very well may sound better than the $1,000 all analog signal path that you have at your project or home studio. Tip number 5, small amps for big sounds, big amps for small sounds. Now, I'm a big fan of this policy in general, live or studio, but what I have found is a lot of small amps sound a lot bigger when you record them. And on the contrary, big amps typically have very nice clean tones that are very deep and complex compared to what you get from small amplifiers. That's what I meant by small sounds is more so clean sounds, but big amps for cleanish sounds doesn't have the same ring as big small, so yeah. Now, if you've been in the guitar world for a little bit, the small amp part probably will not surprise you. Supros and Champs have been known to sound like Marshall stacks on recordings. And if you have not put a Fender Super Reverb or a Marshall 100-watt stack on only like 2 and played some major 7th chords, I highly recommend you do that because cleans are gorgeous. But at the end of the day, most of us are going over overdriven tones. And in my opinion, small amps are superior because they are cheaper, they are easier to carry around, and they are not as loud when you get them to their sweet spot. Now, big amps do not carry these conveniences, but sometimes the studio has them or you can get them on loan. And I just encourage you to fight the urge to crank them. Cranking them can often lead to gain staging issues and blowing out mics and neighbor complaints as well. Now, I'm not going to tell you if the perfect opportunity arises to crank a 100-watt Marshall Plexi half stack on 10 in a professional studio that's gain staged correctly that you don't do it. Please absolutely do that. It's fantastic. But for most practical uses, a lot of times I find that small amps are superior for the big sounds and big amps are superior for the smaller clean sounds. And that's it. There's 5 tips to improve your recorded guitar tone. Let me know what you think. Have you already tried some of these? Have some of your real world experiences counteracted what I just mentioned? I am open to learning as well. Catch you guys later.